to A Well-Designed Business. My name is Luann Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday. Up on Power Talk Friday today, Brad Clinard joins me. Brad is a certified financial planner from High Point, North Carolina. What you will learn today is what I have come to learn over the last several months, and that is that Brad and his family are not your average certified financial planners. You'll hear me compare him often to our friend Peter Lang, the Designer CPA, because like Peter, Brad specializes in working with interior designers in his practice. This choice represents their genuine desire to help designers maximize the money that you earn over your lifetime. And as he calls it, to help you do intentional planning for abundant living. I don't really think I need to say much more because as you listen to Brad, I'm positive you will hear his genuine desire to help our industry for the life and the future that we all deserve to build. You know who else wants to help you run your design business? Our sponsors do. That's who. Right at the top of this list is Kirsch. Kirsch has, in the last 2 years, revamped so much of their product line to change with the times, to serve you and your clients with the best drapery hardware, from non-deco rods for the sleek, minimal look of ripple folds to decorative rods in the Buckingham collection. No grass growing under the feet of this 100-year-old plus company. To learn all about the fabulous products and to find your local distributor, go to Kirsch.com today. That's KIRSCH.com. All right, I'm happy to introduce you to Brad. Hi, Brad. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Luann, well, thank you for having me. It's a real honor. I'm grateful to spend some time with you.
Well, I'm looking forward to it too, Brad, because I feel like I've been on a nice little run lately with trying to check off all the bases, or as many bases as I can, with helping our designer colleagues with the money end of their business. So we've had Peter Lang recently, we've had Ashley Michike recently, we've had Kimberly Merlitti recently, and by recently I mean over the last couple of months. And so today, Brad, what's interesting is all of these experts have been talking to us about the tips and the strategies for managing the money in our business, specifically related to the financial aspect of our business. But High Point Financial Design, I mean, I notice your sub-tagline here on your website is intentional planning, abundant living. And that just lets me know right away that we're going to be talking about something a little unexpected when it comes to financial planning, that you have a different perspective on it. But the point of it is that you are helping us with our personal financial planning, which is important because we're working hard all day to make the money. We got to make sure we hold on to it and we can use it for our personal finances, right?
Absolutely. Well, we all know that so much of our lives revolve around money, but money's not the most important thing in life. We have to understand how to use money to empower us to live an abundant life, and that's really what we're trying to help clients with.
Yeah, so you have a very unique philosophy there at your company. So number one, you specialize in working with interior designers. As financial planners, that's your mission. You remind me of Peter Lang, the Designer CPA. So these are the clients that you solely want to work with, correct?
That is correct. So My background is kind of unique. We are from High Point. So many people know us as the furniture capital of the world. So growing up in High Point, I always say most of my parents' friends, they used to make furniture. And as a child, that's very easy to understand. My parents were in the traditional wealth management industry, so they focused on investing. I think that really, from a young age, seeded in me a curiosity about the finances, but also growing up in High Point, I had this curiosity of twice a year, our entire town would change. We have a town of about 110,000, and so twice a year for 2 weeks, we have about 80,000 furniture and designers come into town. So it really has impacted me from a young age.
I just take a few minutes on that because that is every time I've been to High Point, I literally think about that. Like, what is it like to be a local and have this complete swarm of like almost doubling the size of your town for these 7 or 8 days? And of course, there are different parts of markets. So some of the other the bigger brands and stuff I understand come in even the week before. But that's, as a local, that's got to be absolutely craziness.
Well, I remember as a young child, we've moved since, but we had a basement. And so every year, one of the challenges logistically of High Point is we do not have enough hotel rooms for all the designers that are coming into town. So ever since we were children, we would have designers and furniture reps come in, and they would rent out the basement. And I do remember there was a real pivotal moment one year. We had a designer from Norway came and stayed with us, and he told me, he said, and I was probably 8 or 9 years old at the time, and he said, Brad, I'm a designer. I have the ability to change and impact the world. And I think I was kind of mesmerized.
Wow.
He was so cool. And I just was thinking, well, when I grow up, I want to be like him.
Oh.
So that kind of made me think, there's something special about designers. And that is not my superpower. As I continued to grow up, I really wanted to learn more about finances and money and how to be an efficient steward of those resources. But really working with my parents, that's really where we wanted to shift from traditional wealth management into something really focused that was special for designers.
That's interesting. That's such a great story. I can picture you there and being so impressed by this gentleman from Norway, and so cool, very cool. So as you have come into the company and you've been running it with your family, you guys have this, you call it financial design. What is financial design, and how do you explain it to potential design clients, Brad?
Yes, well, so I joined my dad's practice 10 years ago, and I have a background as a certified financial planner. My mom and dad, they've been in the wealth management business for over 35 years. And when I first joined him, he was working for one of the very large national banks that had bought an investment firm. His original company was a small regional brokerage firm, and Dad always remembered and looked back on the days where before 1992, banks were legally not allowed to own brokerage firms. So when his firm got bought out, he kind of got absorbed in that bank culture. We'd always been looking to get back to independent ownership. So 3 years ago, we did that. Now we independently own our own company as small business owners. I think a lot of the designers that we work with that independently own their own business, it allows us to resonate with them the challenges of just the day-to-day grind of owning a business. So long story short, he had always been in wealth management. And I came on board and I said, well, Dad, even our most wealthy clients, they don't consider themselves, they don't resonate with the word wealth. And as an industry, it really has not adapted very quickly to the changes that we've seen in technology and how people are living their lives. So when we decided to rebrand, we said, well, we could be financial planning, that's more consistent, but really we just decided to cut down all stereotypes and come up with this idea of financial design. So that's our combination of real financial planning, investing, making an intentional life plan for clients, and then using my background of psychology to have an empowered mindset, all in the pursuit of that concept we talk about of abundance. And we have a way that we defined abundance for clients, and we have that whole framework packaged in a way that's really comfortable and easy for designers to understand.
You know, I have to say, it reminds me, speaking of you, when I first met Peter Lang, the Designer CPA, because, you know, there's something intimidating about financial planners and wealth managers and CPAs, right? And so not maybe for every single person in my audience listening, but for a lot of us, because a lot of us are right brain. A lot of us know that we need to pay attention to this stuff. But when you start to have a conversation, even with like our financial planner, he's the nicest guy under the sun. But usually within the 5 minutes, my eyes are just glazing over and I'm like, what are we talking about here? Right? And I just hear it in your voice, and I hear it in your the mission that you have, that you want to make it so that it is, because it is so important for us to have financial planning in place for our personal assets, because otherwise we get to a point in our life, or we at the end, you know, towards the end of our life, or even if there's a crisis in the middle, and we don't have a plan B. So what I think a lot of us do, though, is avoid it because it is onerous. Okay. So I love that you come to it from, you know, it's almost like you come to it from a holistic standpoint. Like I can hear you, intentional planning and abundant living and mindset. So you are taking people as full-fledged human beings, not just the balance statement and not just the what the money in the bank is. So because what you do is you start, when you work with somebody, Brad, you start with the values, I understand from reading about you, and not their financial goals. What does that mean, and how does that work?
Yes, well, and I will touch on the values here in just one moment, but I think the context is really important. So since we've decided to focus on working with designers, we came up with we call it the Designer's Dozen, and it's essentially 12 challenges that designers face in working with traditional financial planners. So one of those, as you've pointed me to, is the difference between starting with goals versus values. I do think that a lot of the disconnect is that our industry has always been very sales-oriented in a way that is product-driven, and so one way you see that is in goals. So a lot of financial advisors will start by saying, Luann, what are your top 5 financial goals? And those are very sterile conversations that, you know, you may want to save $1 million, pay off your mortgage, send your kids through education at college, and retire at age 65. However, the problem is that those oftentimes they change over the course of your lifetime. Values, however, are consistent over people's lifetime. So I look at a lot of things with this difference is goals are all future focused, where values are more present focused. And a lot of times if you talk with a designer, why have you not sat down and talked with a financial planner? Well, they're going to have me focus on a financial plan that's 30 years from now. We need something here today. When we think about it from a psychological perspective also, goals tend to excite people in a very temporary place, whereas values really excite our soul. So they create empowerment from kind of deep within us. Goals are things that have a shelf life. Once you reach the goal, once you have $1 million, well, what's next? If you're making your financial decisions based on your values, though, you can really seek infinite fulfillment. That as you go through life, you're constantly pursuing those values.
I completely understand what you're saying, and I am intrigued by it. So the only part that I'm not understanding is how for example, tell us some ideas of values that people have shared with you that you use in this way and you work in this way. So I get having the goal. The goal is easy. Like you said, $1 million, pay off a kid's, college, support 2 weddings, 2 daughters' weddings, yada, yada, yada. But so get me through what happens when you say to me, no, Luann, I want to know when I speak to designers what their values are. What are some of those things?
Okay. Well, for a lot of times, like let's say that our a client's values are comfort, security, family, community, and fun. If we were only focused on our goals, the values versus goals conversation, it really comes up when we have the most difficult decisions of our life, or when we have shock to our financial situation. So let's go back to 2008, and we were in the middle of a financial crisis. If a designer was having to make difficult decisions around their investment portfolio, if we were only focused on the goal, then you say, well, I've got to get $1 million. However, if we focus on the value is, are we pursuing comfort, safety, security? And the plan may actually be heading us in that direction. The other thing that I mentioned was fun. We have a lot of times, I just recently brought on a client who had gone through a divorce, and one of her top values was fun. And she came to me and she said, well, Brad, I want to buy a sports car, and I already know that you're going to tell me that that's a bad decision. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, no, not at all. We've taken your top 5 values. Having fun is one of those. This sports car is a way that you can live that abundant life. That's your value. So yes, we did a check to make sure that the financials worked out. It did not jeopardize her long-term plan. So we gave her the thumbs up and said, go enjoy the sports car.
Interesting. I love that. So the point is that we don't just throw or ditch the plan because somebody wants to have fun, but we help them look at all of their assets and say, you can have a sports car and keep on track with the other values. And, I guess the goals do make a part of the plan, right? But it's just that you're not putting goals ahead of values, but they must be meshing somewhere, right? We have to still have a place that we want to be at a certain point in our life, correct?
Luann, that's a wonderful way of saying it.
Okay, good. Okay,
I also think there's a component of consistency because it creates that congruency deep within ourselves. I always say that to me, philosophy that I bring towards our finances is really summed up in 2 things that Socrates said. He said, "Know thyself and nothing in excess." To me, really understanding our values is that first point to knowing yourself. But it's also, if we think of a family unit, it's widely known that money plays a role in about 50% of divorces, and that's a very sad fact. But if as a family unit, we both may have the same goal, which is have $1 million. However, our values may be very different. So if a husband and wife are not on the same page when it comes to their values, so I think then that creates problems in a marriage. So that's another thing, that really having consistency with understanding what your values are and how that interrelates with your partners, that's also another important dynamic.
That has got to be particularly challenging for you in what you do, because if somebody within a couple unit, if they have not resolved their, like you said, their values and their perspectives about money, but it's because, look, we can be married to somebody, we could be in a relationship, a partnership with somebody, and not have it 100% resolved and get through and not have it be the end of the world. But when we go to start to make decisions about where and what we're going to do with our family's money, that's where things can get a little crazy pants. I mean, honestly, right? And so, you're not a psychologist, you're not a therapist, but people kind of have to work out their stuff. And what are you doing? You're asking the questions to get them to think, and then asking them to come back sort of unified in what they're going to do.
Well, I do think we used to say that the best investment was a conversation, and I think, as you point out, I am not a I am not a family counselor.
Right.
However, there is a kind of a fine line. So if someone has mental challenges, psychological disorders, and they need professional counseling, we always refer that out. However, I do have a background in psychology. I have a designation in behavioral finance, which is really the combination of psychology and traditional financial planning. So I do spend a lot of time really trying to understand how our psychology affects us. So I remember listening to one of your podcasts where Michelle Williams, she was highlighting the importance of our mindset towards money. And I think we all, from childhood, they may be partial truths that are passed down in families from generation to generation. But I'm sure, Luann, you know that there's a lot of idioms or euphemisms about money. Have you ever heard people say things like, money is the root of all evil, the almighty dollar?
Money doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah. And I think that these are things when we have as a society conversations that are uncomfortable, that's where we use a lot of these euphemisms. So I've heard things like, she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, or when your cousin gets money, it just burns a hole in his pocket, or mom controls the purse strings. So as typically before the age of 10, a lot of these things are subconsciously put into our subconscious about how we view money.
Yeah, and what happens now is, Brad, this does affect us, whether we, in many ways, I would imagine. Number one, it primarily probably just affects us in whether we take control over this and ownership of even seeking out somebody to help us with our personal financial planning, right? I mean, some people, their programming could be, I don't have enough money to worry about it, so I shouldn't do it. And meanwhile, they might. Or their program could be that they don't trust somebody that's going to do something like that. Or when they come to you, maybe they are open and coming to you. But to your point earlier, if their money mindset is completely different than their partner, this could affect this means that they might have values that are different, which could affect the goals that you make, right?
Yes. And I think it's very important for designers, because designers by nature are creators. And so I think creators naturally want to live in abundance. And if I think about so many of the podcasts that you've shared, Luann, is you have the most energetic. I think you've got more energy than probably anybody I know. You're a big promoter. You're big on growth, and those things. Sometimes there's an inconsistency between designers who want to live an abundance mindset, but then when it comes to their personal finances, they may live in scarcity or have more of a fixed mindset. And oftentimes that comes up with being either too cautious or too risky.
Right. I mean, I know that a scarcity mindset can affect interior designers when they are creating proposals, when they are pitching themselves for projects, when they are asking for the money, because if you have a scarcity mindset, you automatically assume and impose that mindset to the other person. And it's so crazy. And, I just recently last summer did this course, Sales for Creatives, and it was the very first module that I do in the Sales for Creatives course is talking about how, to your point, how we are raised by our family, by the environment, by all different things, to have these points of view about money and these markers in our mind about what money is and what it does and what it means to us. But the reality is that, I spent 35 minutes describing, we talked about one person's money set versus another person's money mindset. And the reality is I looked at them and I said, each of you are committed to yours being real. And everybody agreed. And I said, so is yours real, or is the person sitting next to yours real? Like that just expresses how there's no realness in it at all. It is what we believe, but it doesn't mean it's a fact, right?
Right. And we all, I think, perspective is everything, and that goes back to that philosophy 101 on knowing thyself. It was something that we were going to offer, and so I believe that you keep show notes. So from a professional perspective, we look at that there are four types of money scripts. So this would be money avoidance, money worship, money status, or money vigilance. And most everyone falls into some of those categories, not 100% in one or the other. But people that avoid money, they may have subconscious things that say, well, the rich people are greedy. It's not okay to have more than you need. And for a designer, that might show up in not asking for the value of their services when they put out that proposal. From the worshiper's perspective, they may subconsciously think that money buys freedom, and the idea is that more money will always make you happier. If our status focused, then all of a sudden we start to say, well, my net worth is not really ingrained deep in who I am as a person, but my net worth defines who my self-worth is. And that can be sometimes a fixation of only wanting new things, using money to kind of surround ourselves with physical things where we might avoid relationships, and using money in other ways. The last one is money vigilance, and that's where maybe we felt guilt or shame, or that there would not be enough money, so money becomes a very private matter where we don't talk about it with other people. And it may also be you may invest in other people, but you feel guilty about spending on yourself. So where people fall on that spectrum of these scripts that started from childhood can really be an empowering experience once you have clarity around that. So in the show notes, there will be a link, and for the first 10 designers that fill that out, we will be sending out an email to let them go through a survey. It will take about 15 minutes to ask questions about how you view money, but that should help provide a lot of clarity around what your script is when you think about money.
Interesting. Is there no such thing as a positive money story? I mean, like these are, or is because these, when you describe them, they feel to me and sound to me that each has a negative aspect. But is it really that there's only these four, and maybe you as an individual have figured out how to have a positive aspect among one of these, or are these? Is it the point is that you really address the ones that adversely affect us, and therefore we don't talk about the ones that are maybe neutral or positive?
So two things I will say on that, Luann, and that is a great question. So I think the focus on the money scripts is to help identify people that where they find traps. These are places that people get stuck.
Okay.
There are people that have really reached a point in life where they do view money with an abundance mindset. They see it as a flow, not something to be held, and more growth mindset. From the psychological perspective, a lot of it comes from deep psychology, is that as children, everything is taken care of us for us, and then we reach a point where we sometime between the ages of 6 years old is typically when you start to see this. You start to hear these things like your parents saying, as you mentioned, money doesn't grow on trees. That creates a psychological chasm, that there's now a discrepancy between, I thought everything in the world was safe, and now I'm realizing that my parents said things to me that made me feel like that there is too much scarcity. I may not have resources. And so these scripts are helped to design to help us find clarity to really reach a point where we do create a positive money script for ourselves.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think, look, every time I do one of these podcasts and I have these conversations that make my brain think, obviously I start to process it from my own, perspective and what I think and feel about the things that somebody like yourself says to me. And when you say from abundance and growth and flow, I guess if I were to take a test like this, I can't imagine that any single person on the planet doesn't have a combination and layers of them to their psychological relationship to money. But I think overall, for me, it is definitely like there's always enough. Like I'm just like that on everything. There's always enough. Let's just keep going. You know what I mean? I don't know. Again, my mom and my Aunt Honey.
And Luann, I think this really kind of points, I mentioned the designer dozen piece, and it's really one of the things that made us want to raise our hand and focus on working with interior designers as a niche. About a year ago, my business coach said, it's really time to focus on a niche. And I said, he mentioned that we do have a large group of some of my dad's older clients who were in one industry. And I said, well, he said, you should just focus on that industry. And I said, well, I don't find those to be the most enjoyable people to work with. And my coach said, well, who are the most fun people to work with? And I said, well, being in High Point, we've got some of these designers that we help, and they are energetic, creative. They're just fun to spend time with. So that's where we started to develop this list of what are things that we specialize in that we can provide value to designers that are unique. And that makes me think one of them is the communication preferences. So recently you did a podcast with Taylor Spellman, and she talked about some hard truths. And I think that really highlighted for me the challenges that designers who may be very creative minded face when they're trying to find professionals to give them advice and guidance.
Yes. How, mind-blowing was that conversation with Taylor. Here's somebody who is earning, working hard, diligent, doing everything she's supposed to be doing, except for really having the people who are managing her money accountable to her. And she's learned a hard lesson. It'll never happen to her again. But to your point about communication, right? So are these people that are handling her money, like she said in the conversation, she went to the CPA and said, what's going on here? And he was like, you don't need to know. Don't worry about it. And that was when she said, if you remember, she's like, uh-oh. Uh-oh, nobody should say that to me about my money, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there was a visceral, I almost felt pain for her when she was explaining the story that she had been through.
Me too. I just got goosebumps now thinking about it. I felt like it was a stomach punch. It broke my heart to think of her going through that. And but I do believe just what I said at the end of that show, that the universe puts a lesson in front of you and you can blow right by that lesson or you can learn it. If you blow by it, it's going to come back at you again. And this lesson was strong enough for her to take huge notice of it, but not enough to put her all the way down. And so now when she reaches the next level of her business, because she will, that kid is a rock star. Now she will have, like she said, there's power in it now. Now she just feels so much more in control and understanding but in this conversation though, that conversation with Taylor was specifically about the day-to-day managing of her business money. But to your point, what you do is Taylor really could use somebody like you now that manages her personal money coming in, and how will she grow that, and how will she protect that, and how will that part of her life go, right? Because that's really the tandem here. You're managing and helping people work with their money once it's in their own personal kitty, right?
So I think every individual that works with a financial planner needs to understand their client's communication preferences. Mm-hmm. So generally there's 4 different types of communication styles. and we call them blue, red, green, and yellow. The blues are very analytical. They're driven by being correct, having the right answers, being prepared. Reds are more progressors. They're very productive. They want to stick to an agenda and move forward, focusing on wins. If we think about our greens, they're more focused on relationships. They want to keep people happy. The key is focusing on trust and relationships. And then the yellows are, I would take a stab, Luann, and think that you might be a yellow. These are the people that are the most fun to spend time with. They're very sociable, highly engaging, super positive, and energetic. So when you talk with yellows, you want to focus with understanding what their story is and seeing how their story works together. So the problem with our industry is if we've got four major types of communication styles. I'm a numbers person, so if we just shoot in the dark, there's only a 25% chance that a financial planner is going to communicate with you in a way that resonates. And I think that is the big gap, if you will, between financial planners and designers, is that I think most of the designers are in that 75% of category where the advisors may be very analytical, data, spreadsheet, or sales driven. And if the designers are not in that mindset, then they are not going to be communicated with about how their financial foundation can be put in place to help them live an abundant and empowered life.
To my point earlier, where 5 minutes into the conversation with our planner, my eyes are glazing over, right? That's what you're saying. He's a great guy. He's terrific at what he does for a living, but he doesn't communicate what we're doing with our portfolio in a way that engages me and meets me at the way I think and react. Is that what you're saying?
And that's a real skill, because I know with your husband, Vin, he is the efficient, data-driven. He wants to see the numbers. So when you're having a meeting with clients, if there are spouses that have different communication preferences, it's so vital that to make everyone feel empowered and engaged in the process, that you would be able to connect to each individual's communication styles, just like we bridge those gaps with the values as well.
It's awesome, because I have to tell you, it's so smart for you to approach your business this way, because first of all of us needs to approach our business this way. Whether we're an interior designer and making a proposal to a husband-wife team or a couple team about a $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 design project, or me making a proposal to two people about a $20,000 window treatment project. If you really leave one or the other decision maker out of the environment of the proposal from a communication standpoint, you are at risk of not getting that project. So I think it's sales 101. It's very unusual that a financial planner takes this approach. And I think that's the whole secret sauce of what you do. And that you like I said, you remind me so much of Peter Lang, who he just enjoys working with us crazy pants creatives. I mean, it's just the way it is, and we're fun, right?
So Peter and I, we have connected, and I'm actually really excited to be meeting him face to face at Market, and I think he is a great example of someone who is. I don't think he would be offended if I said, I think accounting by definition is probably not the most exciting thing, and he has a real gift. Much like I try to do, he has been able to take complex accounting principles and teach that to designers in a way that's approachable. So I always think a lot of Peter and think he's really I try to think that I'm chasing after him to really be a focus on helping designers here.
Well, what I love is that you are two halves of what we need for our to safeguard our money and to plan. And because my thing is if we're going to work whether it's a 6-hour day or a 15-hour day, if it's a 3-day week, it's a 6-day week or a 7-day week, whatever you have designed for your own personal business and the way you run it. The point is that you're putting in the time, energy, in order to make money, to support your family, to support your lifestyle, to support your values, to do the things, to your point, that you want in your life to have part of it. And, here's Peter, who helps us in the nitty-gritty of the business money, and you're on the other side with the personal side of the finances and how we manage those and go forward with that.
Yes, and when I think about that, there really is, I think this is why we decided to really focus, just like Peter, on interior designers, is that there's a gap. And I think one thing that I've really loved, and you really provide an incredible resource for the designers. And I think it's really amazing. I've been tried to catch up on them, and the amount of information is just wonderful. But what you see is that there are so many coaches and business professionals that are trying to encourage designers to be focused on their businesses. Peter has filled in a gap of who can help designers from the accounting perspective, from running the business. And what I was kind of surprised when I started looking is there were no financial planners focused on only helping designers. And that's where I think, being from High Point, we understand designers, and through some of these things we've talked about can really start to bridge the gap.
I know. It's important. I'm so thrilled that you do this, because it just gives us a layer of security and comfort of knowing that you get us, right? When we come to the table, we don't have to be a blue, green, or a red. We could be a yellow, and it's okay. So the thing is that my understanding from, again, reading your website and talking to you a little bit before the program is that when we think about when do we need a financial planner, for your particular firm, you're saying to us, look, when your household income is around that $200K mark, this is when you really need a financial planner. You should be thinking about one. You should be interviewing one. You should be starting to work with one. Is that correct, Brad?
Yes, and so this is where we kind of shift, where a lot of our conversation has been more psychological, and really there are some key financial foundation pieces that everybody should be putting into place. We will be offering in the show notes 10 keys to financial foundation. So there are technical things that everybody needs to have. The number one thing, I think, is organization. You need to understand where all the moving parts are of your financial piece at any one time, and that should be something. Do you understand what your net worth is? Do you understand the trend of your net worth? And that actually does become a goals-based thing, is where do we want to go? So other topics that need to be addressed would be cash flow, debt management. Do you have student loans that you're working through? How much should you take out in a home mortgage? Protection. I always find that we pretty much all of us have health insurance, and if we don't, that's something that's really important. That's the one thing that can make us go into financial bankruptcy. But there's also things that we need on a personal level and also on a business perspective. Business owners need errors and omission insurance. On a personal side, we may need disability insurance or life insurance. Oftentimes, those are things that people don't want to think about. And then we have investing, saving for retirement. One thing that is such a challenge for everyday families is education planning. We all know the cost of college continues to increase. And so each of these components of having a solid financial foundation are really important. Now, to your point, because some of these things become technical, a lot of people do want to outsource these. So if I have a tax problem, I call Peter. If I want help with somebody looking at all of my personal finances and putting that all on a one-page visualized dashboard and having a one-page financial plan, that's where they'll call High Point Financial Design. And typically we work most efficiently with families that have an income of $200,000 or are approaching retirement.
Okay. So the thing about it is that when you do this 10 keys to financial, when you get this, there's a download that you can get, and we will put all of this, as Brad said, in the show notes, the 10 keys to financial foundation. You're going to look at these. If you're in the 200K as a household, so it doesn't mean that your design firm is netting 200K. Maybe your partner has a job outside of your design firm, and your partner is bringing in 100 or 150, and you're putting in 50, or your design firm is doing 300K, whatever it is. The point is that this little checklist will help you go through and say, okay, these are the foundational things that I need to address. I'm at a position where I should have this conversation and really be intentional about creating the abundant life that I want to have, right? That's what you say. That's your whole tagline, right?
Yeah.
I love it. But the thing is, so what happened? So we come to you, you sit down, you have a conversation, you talk about our money mindset, you get all that squared away, you ask us to share our values, and then you help us make a plan for where and how we want our money to be managed and grow?
Yes. So we will create really 3 plans. There's a financial plan, which says, are we heading in the right direction? There's an investment plan that makes sure our money is working for us and that we're growing. And when we have an investing conversation, that is a whole nother conversation. Luann, we could probably have a whole nother day just to talk about investing. And then the third part is the life plan. And part of me, I've had clients, and this is really sad, but I had a client, and she was a flight attendant. If we know anything about flight attendants, they lost their pensions back when the airlines were restructured. So she lived her life with kind of a lot of anxiety around not having enough money when she's retired. She had traveled the world but never left the airports, and she had a long list of places that she wanted to go back in Europe, in Southeast Asia, and experience. And it was very traumatic. It kind of impacted me early in my career because she retired at 65 and she passed away at 67 and had not been able to enjoy a lot of those trips that she wanted to. So for me, the life plan is really how can we take a portion of clients' money, put together in a systematic place that we collect all this, a list of things that we want to do. And we want to do those not when we're 80 or 90 years old, but make sure that, and this is also important for a family, that both spouses are on the same page. How can we really use this money to live an intentional life, live abundantly today? And part of this, Luann, was actually a personal exercise. The first 5 years in my career, I was making a lot of money, and to be honest with you, the weekends I would go and sit on the sofa, and life was not really, I was really not in a great place. I was working 80, 90 hours a week, trying to get the business started. And in the last 5 years, I've started every 6 months, I do an adventure trip. So for me personally, I've been very inspired in my life by Joseph Campbell. And if anybody doesn't know Joseph Campbell, he was George Lucas's mentor. So kind of he talks a lot about the hero's journey. And anytime we watch a movie that really inspires us in our soul, it talks about that hero's journey. And one of Joseph Campbell's things is follow your bliss. And that's 3 very critical words. Follow, you must take action. It can't be anybody else's. It has to be something personal to you. And bliss. I think we all of us know when we're in a moment of bliss. Some people call that flow, but that's really where we're in highest service to other people, giving, or involved in an activity that we enjoy. And for a lot of people, that is travel. So for me, that's adventure travel. And if I think back the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to be able to travel, hike across Iceland and through Peru, through Alaska. If I was not intentional about my life, I would never be able to have had those experiences. And when it comes to money, that's really something that is how I can provide and define an abundant life for our clients, is helping them to create clarity around how we can use our money to live that great life.
That's amazing. I love that. I don't. Yeah. Okay, so here's what's interesting. This is why you are so completely unique, because I have had how many conversations with financial planners over the course of our married life, and no one has ever said to us, let's figure out what you want during your life. I think that's really what you're focusing on, and you're saying it in your words. But what I'm hearing is you work with people to understand not only what they want to have when they get to the point that they retire from their business, but what do they want during the years of running their interior design firm. And you sit there and say, and let's figure out a way financially that you can have that, like the designer who wanted the sports car, like you who want to do the adventure travel every 6 months. That's amazing, because every conversation I've ever had with a financial planner is, how much money do you want to have when you retire? What do you want to do when you retire? Let's figure out how much you need to live on when you retire. And it's all about pounding it away so that when I get to be, 80 years old, it's all sitting there. My husband Vin is 71 now. And if I had a nickel for every time in the last 2 or 3 years, I went, when are we going to start to do this stuff? When do we start to do the things on the bucket list, right?
So I think as business owners, I think when I define success, I think that there's three mindsets that we have to incorporate. And those mindsets are, and I think a lot of people talk about passion, but passion in itself is not enough. So we need to be passionate. We also have to have a servant mindset, and we also have to have a craftsman mindset. And I think that's where I think a lot of designers are really passionate. I think that they are full of service. When it comes to their financial life, oftentimes they don't have the craftsman, the technical expertise. And that's where we could have had a conversation today that would have sounded like a lot of other financial advisors, and we could have talked all about the details of investing and debt management and cash flow and retirement savings. That craftsman mindset is what I've focused on. So we take care of all those details, but we try to do it in a way where we're not giving out 3-inch thick financial plans that as soon as you leave the office, it just is going to go into the
into a drawer,
waste basket.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I
had a few of those.
So my background, Luann, as I mentioned, I'm an economist, and one of the things economists always say is that incentives matter. And I think that as an industry, the incentive is that most advisors, they need to build up as much assets from clients as possible, and that is not consistent with helping clients, sending them out income to live an abundant life. And so that's a decision that we've made very clearly, as we want to focus on helping designers. And I think that's why there's a gap, and why oftentimes designers have not gotten the financial care that they needed.
So remarkable. I love it. Now, let's have a little conversation about my baby designers who, and by the way, a baby designer could be in her first or his first year in business, and their household income because of their spouse could be over $200K. But let's say we are a single person and we are not at $200K personal net income yet. What would you say to those designers? Because I understand, here's what I want to say. If you're a designer out there and your personal net income in your household is $200K or more, and you're not working with a financial planner, my advice is call Brad. I'm just going to say, because this sounds like amazing stuff. But what are we saying to the up and coming baby designer that you got a 30-year-old daughter or son that's started their business, Brad? What are you saying to them before they're ready for somebody like you? What are some keys that we need to put in their little brains?
Well, I would definitely say look at that financial foundation checklist.
Okay.
Let's start there, and a lot of it is a commitment to say my personal finances are important.
Okay.
I'm no longer going to live in the dark. So a lot of it is about clarity, awareness, and becoming organized. And I think that there are a lot of steps that individuals can do on their own to become organized. I really like the idea of what I would say for someone who has not started to look at their finances is set up a personal business meeting with yourself once per month. And I recommend the same thing for couples that are struggling with money. Is I think it's not healthy for relationships to talk about money on a consistent basis. It becomes one partner nagging the other or being upset, and it brings up negative emotions. So I always recommend for couples, for instance, is Tuesdays, the first Tuesday of each month, and I do that intentionally. We don't want to start talking finances on Friday or Saturday. You should enjoy your weekend. So commit to having a 1 hour meeting the first Tuesday of every month and go through these things. Look at how much did I spend on the last month? How much did I bring in income? How much am I saving? And if we start to commit to taking one action per month, understand your cash flow. You should understand your cash flow each month and cash flow sounds complicated. That is simply how much income did you have that came into your bank account and how much spending went out. And that should be a net positive number. Generally, I try to get people to have none of their mandatory expenses more than 50%. I like to have fun spending at 30% and savings at 20%. And that should be a target. And some people say, well, there's no way I can save 20%. And that's where every individual's personal balance sheet and personal spending is different. But that is if you want to live a life of having less financial stress, it may not be a social norm, but if you can keep your essential expenses to 50%, have fun spending at 30%, and save 20%, that is a formula for generally having a lower stress experience in life.
That's exciting. Okay, let's repeat that. So your living expenses at 50%, your fun expenses at 30%, and your savings at 20%. Okay. That's
and the
interesting.
other way I would think of fun expenses, you could call that lifestyle expenses.
Right. So that's your travel. That's your, it's all the fun things. It's all the things that make everything else worth it.
and I can hear people now saying, well, that's totally unrealistic. So it is a target that you're working towards. So if you're recently out of college and you have a lot of student loans and you're living in a part of the country where the cost of living is more expensive, that may be unrealistic.
Right.
And you want to say, is there a path where in the next 5 years, you may have to take care of a debt issue first.
Right. Okay. Right. So that means your first column might be at 60 or 70% because you're pounding down a previous debt of something or whatever.
Correct. And I think it's very important for people to give themselves some grace. It is not an all or none. And what happens is people say, well, I'm not saving 20%, so it doesn't matter what I do. If you can start out, if you're saving 0%, and then next year you can save 5%, and then 8%. By year 3 or 4, you're saving 10%. The key in my mind is that you're trending in a positive direction. You're creating more security, more financial stability for yourself over time.
Right. I love it. It's the truth. It's so often we just throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're like, I can't do it, so forget it all. But every little bit helps, whether it's adding a little bit every month and paying down your debt a little bit more every month than typical, or it's putting a little bit more away. And I also like that listen, there was a moment there that you said, when I said, what do we want to tell our baby designers and what do we want to tell the people that are in their late 20s and 30s and starting their businesses. And you said to really commit to understanding and knowing your business and your finances, and to have that meeting every single month, and to commit to every month, understanding one more aspect of it. Maybe this, like you said, this month you're going to understand your cash flow. The next month you're going to understand some other aspect. But I have to tell you, I know from personal experience talking with dozens and dozens of interior designers and other business owners, is that we can sometimes be in business 20 and 25 years and not understand these things. We're, especially if we're part of a couple where the other, maybe we're a designer and we have a husband, and our husband is financially solvent, and our design business makes money, but it's not required to make money for our family income, or our design business supports the fun part of our family's, lifestyle. And therefore, you don't have to be a hashtag baby designer and really have been pretending to yourself everything is fine. And this is where I like that you brought up Michelle Williams, because I know you agree with her in this, is that we get paid. We make money. We pay ourselves. We work out our business life so that we get a paycheck, right, Brad?
Yes, I can't agree with that more, Luann.
Right. Because a lot of times I have learned that designers their pay comes with whatever's left over at the end of the month. That's not the way to do it. And the reason I bring that up in this context is because if you're going to take your personal finances seriously and use these tools to plan your lifestyle through your life, and to plan your retirement life, and to prepare for transitions that may happen to you, it all starts with realistically paying yourself. Rather than, well, I've been doing this 3 years and at the end of the year I take 10 grand or I take 20 grand. No, every week, right? Every week we have to get paid so that we can plan to do with our money, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of awareness first. You mentioned the word transitions, and one of those things in the designer dozen that we identified is that oftentimes designers do by default just allow their spouse to manage all of the finances. And I think it does set up a difficult situation when there are transitions. So I think those moments of transition can be some of the times where High Point Financial Design as a company can provide the greatest impact on our clients. So I think of transitions as, when it comes to our financial life, oftentimes we use the word grief, and people think, well, grief is just if there's been a family member that's passed away. But psychologically, grief is any time that we have an attachment to something that is changing and is no longer the same. So those moments of grief, that could be, well, my oldest child is getting ready to go to college, and so the home life is not going to be the same. Maybe my parents passed away. I received an inheritance. Maybe we are selling the business. But that is one thing when we talk about working with designers, is there's been two types of clients this year that I've been able to really help, and it's kind of the most difficult, most challenging moments of life. But a lot of people don't realize there's something called gray divorce now, and the fastest growing population of divorced individuals is 65 to 70. Whoa. And it's a real sad thing that I think that there's a lot of sociological things behind it. Oftentimes it's those moments of, well, maybe one of the family members has just retired. Their identity was focused on their career, and now we've got more time with the family. But in that, anytime we have that, or we also see a lot of people don't realize the average age of a recent widow is in her early 60s. And of course, that's averages, but a lot of people, we've had clients that have become widowed in their 40s, and they're left with young families. So that can be a very difficult time for families.
And so the message here is twofold. It's number one, as a family, as a household, to have an understanding and a plan so that during grief and transitions you have protection, but also, to your other point, to have personal knowledge on how to handle and talk about and understand your personal finances in case something happens to the spouse who, quote unquote, handled everything.
And I think, Luann, something that you mentioned is like if your family works with a financial planner, but that financial planner does not connect with you.
Yeah.
If you walked in one day and your husband had passed away, then you have to go in and have a conversation. And that is the most, for a woman who is recently widowed or divorced, that can be one of the most vulnerable times in their entire life. So we have a very clearly defined 3-stage process to help clients that are going through moments of transition. The first stage is the moment of grief, where oftentimes people just feel all sorts of emotions. From a financial perspective, all we want to do is triage, just get somebody breathing again and knowing that we can get through this moment. Then we go to a stage of growth where we actually start to do general planning. And we may not do that for a year. We may just say, you need a year to process, and we're going to take care of the bare necessities to maintain your financial stability, but we want to give you time to regain that balance in life. And then the last, so we have grief, growth, and the last is grace. And grace is this moment of transformation where we really create a new story for our life. It's a new phase. It's revitalization, creating a new identity. I know I've got a woman who recently went through a divorce, and now she's traveling the country in an RV. So, I think it's just, and 30, 40 years ago, you didn't hear stories about that. Right. Now we're living in a time where there's so much abundance for people to really live wonderful lives if they have everything in order.
I love it. I love it. That's so real. I can imagine that. When you put it in a personal context like that, if I were to ever have to be in it, cancel, the VIN man isn't here. Look, I never worry that I can handle anything. I never worry that I'm going to be able to. We all know that there's parts of our financial life that he has domain over, but I'm a smart person and I'll figure it out. But when you add that layer that I'm in that crisis there, and then you add the layer that the people in my financial life, if they don't speak my language, now I can feel that vulnerability. I can feel that right there, because I'm already having my own head case issues because, God forbid, I've lost the VIN man, cancel universe, right? But you add to that they're not talking my language, that I can understand. I can put myself in that position and see how incredibly difficult that would make an already insane situation. So that's interesting. I'm so glad to know that my CPA is a personality that understands and gets me. Yes. But that's a little box on the, check mark on a box that we were going to have to address, I think. So, but it's good. I love the idea of, that you do take human beings as a whole human being. I said it in the beginning, you have like a holistic approach to helping people with their financial planning. And, just like Peter Lang, broken record here, but there is a special place in heaven for people who just want to work with interior designers. I'm just going to say, come on. So, Brad, I have to say, you have been so helpful. Thank you so much. I know there are probably half a dozen other topics that we could take in this direction. And probably what I'm going to have to do is I'll have to have you back on the show, and we'll pull apart something else because this is very helpful. I think that we definitely, to your point, it starts with self-awareness. It starts with knowledge. To Taylor Spellman's point, understanding and knowing and having a grasp on it is a powerful thing. And we all could use a little bit of that in our life. So, Brad, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Luann, this has been a real joy. I'm grateful for our time together and hope that it's been a blessing for someone else.
One thing that I have learned being self-employed for more than 3 decades is that it is up to you and you alone to plan for life's financial challenges as well as plan for your own retirement. There's no pension at the end of the entrepreneurial rainbow, right? No built-in safety net. So as Brad advised us, you can create one and you should create one for yourself, all right? So I want to tell you, if you're not already working with a trusted financial planner, or maybe you've got one and you're not jiving with your current certified financial planner, then, go about finding your one for yourself, or have a little sit down with your current one and ask for what you need. Ask for maybe the explanations or the details that you feel like get glossed over, all right? Or maybe give Brad a call. In the meantime, Brad has shared a few goodies with us today. On my website, luannniagara.com/goodies, you will find these 3 thought-provoking worksheets. The first is 10 keys to financial foundation. The second is a 1-page financial plan. And the third is a 1-page financial dashboard. They all have terrific tips and diagrams to get you thinking about the different parts of your financial plan that you need to pay attention to, okay? And then, we talked about how we each have our own money script. My sales for Creatives members will know that I call it our money story, right? So Brad has a short quiz on his website that you can take that will help you uncover what your money script is. Go to hpfinancialdesign.com/your-money-script. Okay? hpfinancialdesign.com/your-money-script. Okay? And of course, all of these are in the show notes for the episode. So if you're driving, running, doing laundry, don't worry about it. You can go to the show notes and get all of these links, all right? So thank you so much for showing up today. I want you to do something today to make your business better. And how about to create the abundant life that you deserve, right? Take a cue from Brad. Do something. How about, like he says, intentional planning for abundant living? I love it so much, all right? And of course, I can't think of any better advice to give you except decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at luannniagara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.